That was very encouraging. It showed that technology still needs human beings. It can't do without. So a very good example. No, but I would like to start from personal admission. I am tremendously grateful to Rudy Gnutti for inviting me to make this very, very small contribution to the amazing work which you have been all. Well, it's a teamwork, of course, and the amazing coordination, cooperation, solidarity between experts on the one hand and artists and filmmakers, professional filmmakers, scenarists, the technicians. But behind all that, I think there was individually conceived idea by Rudy Gnutti and consistent determination to see it through, to implement it. Implement a very important work. I admit that I learned quite a lot from those people who spoke here and the way in which they were shown. Even what was missing there was very illuminating. Presumed. I remember some of you saw it in 1920s. There was another very powerful film warning by Fritz Lang. It was called Metropolis. The major hero of this film was huge factory, but crowded factory. The crowds were the genuine hero of the book. The warning was about that we are on the road to lose our individuality. We are being transformed into a crowd without faces, anonymous crowd. What we have seen in this book, in this film, was technology. Whenever there was a factory, there were no people. There was just technology. According to the popular joke, in the factories of the future, there will be only 2 living beings employed, 1 man and 1 dog. Man will be there to feed the dog, and dog will be there to watch that man doesn't touch anything. And that's exactly what we have seen. People, there were plenty of people there, but they were not crowd. They were just talking, they were sometimes smoking, they were sitting, they were walking, some were fishing. They were doing all possible things, but their action was away from technology. Technology didn't need people, and people by technology were liberated, so to speak, from what constituted their substance of life. A lot of in this film you have seen was about the threatening end of work. There are many things which point in this direction. One of them, the simplest one, and felt particularly strongly here in Europe, in so-called developed countries, is that work is moving away, workers are left behind. Work is moving away without workers. Workers are elsewhere. Those people who are absolutely happy when they are offered $1 a day or $2 a day to survive and to support their families. Something which no one living in Barcelona would even contemplate to do. But that is only one reason. The simplest, the most vulgar reason of what's happening. The other is a very powerful, very profound restructure of the labor relationship which took place in the last 20, 30 years. The complete change of philosophy of management, so-called flexibilization of labor market, deregulation of labor market. Something unheard of in times when the governments felt obliged, all of them, to promise to fight for full employment, because the normal life meant being employed. What's happened to managerial philosophy? As they say, the fish begins to rot from the head. So the process started actually from government withdrawing from what you beautifully described, namely the providing basic essential necessities of life for everybody in the society, because, as Lord Beveridge, who sketched the idea of social state, I call it, popularly it is called welfare state, now who sketched it, he pointed out that he is doing it not because he is a communist, God forbid, not because even he is a socialist, he is a liberal. Liberal is after human freedom, individual human freedom. But the person who must fight for his shared survival is not free. He is just, a token in the hand of unpredictable, uncontrollable necessities. So the society of free persons, society of genuine individuals, society really able to self-assert, to choose their way of life and to control over the itineraries of their life, that starts from the feeling of security shared by every member of society, that if I am adventurous, if I am trying something new, if I am trying something risky, I can do it because I know that in case of catastrophe, I can be defeated. Whoever undertakes risky enterprises risks being defeated. It is quite a real threat. I know that when it comes to that, to misadventure of a sort, then I can count on community, society and community rolled into one. Some sort of collective insurance against individual misfortune. Now that started it. But then there were other developments. I wonder whether you still remember the idea of Ford factory. Henry Ford, once upon a time, 1930s, 1920s already, was a paragon of the managerial virtues. He was other people involved in business, involved in industrialization, wanted to emulate his example. And Ford factory, many sociologists investigated it. Charlie Chaplin presented it in Modern Times, if you remember. In one way, it was a nightmare, routine, repetition of the same movements all over again, the subordination of human choices to the logic of the conveyor belt. On the other hand, there was one aspect of it which contemporary workplaces don't have. Namely, it offers stability. Some sort, not perfect, but in a way, acquisition of the right of ownership over my job. The job is mine. Why it was so? Because there was, ladies and gentlemen, mutual reciprocal dependency between capitalists, bosses on the one hand, and the workers on the other. Workers dependent on Ford, on their living wages. But Ford depended on his workers for his wealth. He couldn't get wealth from heaven. He had to deploy people, secure more or less endurable conditions so that they worked there, and that was the only way of keeping wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. And when you know, when there is a conflict between two sides, but both sides are aware that there is no escape, they are going to meet tomorrow again, and the next year, in the next 10 years, they are condemned to live together, then they sit around the table, they have what was called collective bargaining, and they try to find a formula which stops what we have been shown here in this film, the inequality rising sky high. That's out of the question. It must be contained, well, in not very pleasant place. Rich people are 20 times richer than the poor people. Not very pleasant, but bearable, tolerable. But what if happens what now happens? Namely, this bilateral dependency has been broken unilaterally. The workers are still localized, tied to the ground, very closely to medieval peasants, glebe adscripti, tied to the ground. If they want to travel, you know what is happening. They're stopped, probably rounded up at the next borderline and sent home. And there is a panic, migration, mass movement of people, and so on, so on. All sorts of trouble. By and large, they cannot follow their bosses. But bosses are free to move. They have tablets, they have iPhones, they have laptops, and of course they have very huge account in off-coast banks, so they can move very easily just with their fingers, not stretching themselves. With their fingers, they can move their capitals far away from the place if their workers, local workers, are too demanding, hard-nosed, going on strike, and not accepting unilaterally and without any dissent the will of their bosses. Very, very unequal situation, very unequal situation. Previously more or less balanced, now, of course, out of control, out of joint. A real decoupling between economic elite and the labor force. Simply to put it in the essence, what is happening is that economic elite is no longer vitally interested in local labor. They are not reserve army for their labor. They are not future supplier of wealth. They are simply one of the infinite number of choices. You can sit in Barcelona and make investment in every corner of the globe without moving, actually, without traveling, without even using your car. And behind these two phenomena, which were so beautifully described in this film, one, this sky-high rise in the income, not of the 20% richest, not of the 10% richest, but in the fortunes of 1% richest people. In the United States, there was recovery after 2007 and 8 credit collapse. This great, if you still remember, you tend to forget very quickly the old catastrophes because there are so many new ones that you have no room to remember all of them. But there was some recovery. There was an added value to what America wealth, total American wealth, possessed. But up to 2014, that is the last data I possess, 93% of this added value was appropriated by 1% of the richest Americans, which means that this trend, which will have been shown in the film, is continuing and even accelerating. Probably it will be even worse. The second aspect of the same process is that middle class is slowly being replaced by what is called precariat. Precariat means simply people who are living, who are living on moving sands. They have no solid ground under their feet. Whatever they achieved in their life, working hard for many, many years for a particular company, could be denied, withdrawn at any moment without any warning. One expert said that the middle classes are more and more similar to the situation of the manual workers, to proletariat. In fact, instead of speaking about proletariat and middle classes, I advise you to think in terms of precariat, which embraces all of them together. So what we observe is polarization of social standing, of social interest. Their growing incompatibility. That's a new situation. The great valor, the great virtue of Rudy Gnutti and all the team who work on the film is that they are not like dystopias, the famous dystopias, which used to threaten their contemporaries. Look, if you continue to go like you go now, that is how it is going to end. In dystopias, what was actually the demerit of dystopias? It was that, first of all, they ascribed all the causes to future catastrophe to one arbitrarily taken aspect of society, not like this film, which offers you. The film offers you complete, exhaustive catalog of the troubles which are ahead, of this ice which needs to be broken by the boat in which we are in. The demerit of dystopias was also that they exuded an air of inevitability. It was not just the possibility on the horizon, but that there's no retreat. That is what is going to happen. That's what is going to happen, and what is even worse than that, always there was one hero in every dystopia who wanted to fight it back, who wanted to return to some more humane kind of living. Always, in every case, he was defeated. There was no exit from this quandary in which we, ourselves, by our own action, our own doing, maneuvered ourselves. This film, my dear friends, is on the contrary a warning and call to arms. I experienced this film as a great manifesto against Margaret Thatcher maxim of TINA. TINA. TINA is abbreviation for there is no alternative. This film is oozing alternatives. It inspires thinking about alternatives. Horrible things were shown in this film, but I feel encouraged in my optimism after seeing it. Because really, it is not too late. We can do something about it. That is a very powerful message, and I'm tremendously grateful to Rudy Gnutti for doing just that. I already told some correspondent he already published in La Vanguardia, but I still repeat that in case you don't read La Vanguardia. Well, that was the example of the biblical prophets. Biblical prophets. Biblical prophets were very, very unlike university professors. Where university professors make prediction, they want realities to confirm that they were right. If it so happens, they will be promoted, they will be given better jobs, they will acquire fame, and so on. Biblical prophets, on the contrary, they wanted to be refuted. And they used these pictures of coming catastrophe in order to tell people, return to your senses. Stop doing what you are doing. Change your ways of life. If you don't do it, look what will happen. But you can do it. You can do it. And I wish the great director of the film just to follow the route of the biblical prophets. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I admit I don't have shortcut solutions to the problems which we confront simply because there are ground issues which have to be handled before we try to think about concrete solutions to our problems. A long, long time ago, when I was a young man, it was more than half a century really, I remember quarreling with my contemporaries, equally young men. There were blocs, political parties, which had programs of different kind of society, different principles, different preferences, different hierarchies of values. So there was a lot of material about which to quarrel, and we did quarrel. The one thing I don't remember being asked all during this quarrel was the question, who is going to do it if we prevail, if my program will be on top. Obviously, that answer to this question was obvious to everybody, on the right, on the left, and in the center. The state will do it. Why the state will do it? First of all, because it is totally, fully, as confirmed by League of Nations and by the Statute of United Nations, it is territorially sovereign state, in control of the territory and population inside the territory. It has the self-sufficiency, so we believed, military, economic, and cultural. In all three essential aspects of life, it is able to sum the accounts inside the boundaries of the country. The two instruments which are necessary to act collectively in effective way are in the hands of the state. And as Max Weber tried to convince us, only in the hands of the nation state, only in the hands of state. What are these instruments? One is power. Power is a shorthand for ability to have things done. And politics. Politics is capability of deciding which things ought to be done. Now, democratic state allegedly, presumably, ought to have both power and politics. Today, my dear friend, situation is different. We have confrontation between powers which are liberated from political control and politics which suffers constantly of the deficit of power. So I wouldn't go too far, I'm terribly sorry to say, to accuse specific politicians in Europe or in any country of Europe being guilty for this inability of the government, of the parliament, of the government, of the juridical system to cope with the challenges of our time. Simply they lack the instruments. Ladies and gentlemen, let us take it seriously in all earnestness and admit that there is some very powerful truth behind it. That our problems are created globally, but our instruments to deal with them are valid locally. Now, that is a discrepancy. Unless we do something about it, I don't think we can really sensibly quarrel of what ideal society we want to build. First, we have to answer the question, who is going to build it? We need this sort of a remarriage of power and politics, which currently live in state of divorce. They are divorce. We have to remarry them. Unfortunately, the forces which would like to remarry them are also in scarce supply. Benjamin Barber, in his recent book, If Males Rule the World, it is only partly satirical title. He really thought that there is a very interesting idea behind. But there he said, very simply, the nation state performed its great historical role. It was a great, great instrument to serve the cause of autonomy and independence. But for the same reason, nation state is absolutely incapable of coping with the issues of global interdependence. But we haven't started even building instruments of collective action which would answer this question, which will be a match to the globality of the problems which we are facing. And globality will be growing. Timothy Snyder published a book a few weeks ago, some sort of a prognosis of 21st century, in which he just raises one question, not yet a question which emerged after Rudy Gnutti finished his book, film, so it couldn't be there. But what he pointed out was that thanks to genetical engineering and green revolution, for the first time in history, we have dealt away with the threat of famine. We produce enough food. If we distributed it wisely there will be no hungry person any longer in the world. But this is considering that our planet has 7 billion inhabitants. Demographic predictions for the next 20, 30 years are that we will reach very quickly 9 billion inhabitants. And all this calculation will be again invalid. Moreover, there is warming of the planet. Warming of the planet means that the arable land where you can grow food, is shrinking. Some countries will be left without such a land to cultivate. Snyder predicts, therefore, that the history which we all believed consolingly we have left behind may come back. Wars, not because of different ideologies, but wars of a shared naked survival, of violent redistribution of essential conditions of human life. Well, I'm not saying that that's an inevitable future. I already expressed the attitudes which I share fully with the makers of this film, that it is much, much too early to say that there is no escape, no retreat, we can still do it. But let us remember that unless we develop the really effective, good to use instrument of collective action, we can't really seriously think about reforming everything which is wrong in our society. And one little thing to add, if this awful enslaving, constraining, routinizing human life factories of times of Fritz Lang or Henry Ford or Charlie Chaplin, they had one positive feature, which workplaces today don't have. The positive feature was that they willy-nilly, deliberately or not, willingly or resentfully produced massive solidarity. People found themselves under one roof, really in one boat, all people interdependent, in a very close neighborhood of each other, and they felt that, as Alexandre Dumas once defined solidarity, one for all for one. That was such a feeling. Go now to average workplace, whether it is a factory or an office or university, whatever, school, and you will see that this solidarity, they are producing what? Mutual suspicion and competition. One worker is potential rival of another. When you come to a new round of outsourcing, economies, austerities, every worker, every employee is interested in the fact that the next worker or employee should be made redundant, not me. That is the product of deregulated labor market. That is the product of the processes which were so beautifully shown here.
Gracias a Zygmunt Bauman por haber venido aquí para apoyar la película y muchas gracias a Pere Portabella por su inmenso apoyo.
Ha sido un placer, ¿eh? Gracias.